before I sit down and fall asleep, in that big cushy chair, I'm going to stand up with, first of all, thank you all for coming to our Chancellor's Lecture and coming on this campus on a beautiful spring day where we have the happiest, smartest students in the world. And even today, as they rush into examinations and write paper, they are happy to be at this great university, and I'm certainly happy to have you here. We have a great event for tonight, and I just want to take a couple minutes to introduce our very distinguished panel, and then we'll get going with some very, very interesting discussion. So the first person I'd like to introduce is to my immediate left here is Carolyn Peck. And Carolyn Peck, as you know, was a standout basketball player for the Commodores from 1984 to 1988, and she spent 2 seasons here as well as our associate basketball coach from 2016 to 2018. Prior to her return to Vanderbilt, she was a leader and the head coach for 2 marketing programs at Purdue, which actually led the Purdue Boilermakers to an NCAA championship in 1999. And of course, life would not be complete without a coaching job in the SEC. So Carolyn also coached at the University of Florida. She spent time with the WNBA's Orlando Miracle, serving as both head coach, general manager, and really being a pioneer and leading the growth and success of the WNBA. And I, of course, know her as well, maybe as a constant presence on ESPN. I was like, she went to Vanderbilt. Wherever I am, I'm in New York City. She went to Vanderbilt. I'm in New Mexico. She went to Vanderbilt. Of course, a brilliant career in broadcasting at ESPN, and she's back there now and working hard at her broadcasting career. Carolyn, it's great to have you, and it's such a privilege to call you our graduate. Now, as the song goes, the man in the middle is John Ingram. And John is a member of the Board of Trustees. He's the chairman of Ingram Industries, which, as you all know, is a large company located here in Nashville. And John has been on kind of really the cutting edge of innovation, and he started out in the book business where there was a lot of microfiche and a lot of big warehouses, and John has just kind of taken that business into really the 21st century using some of his Owen Graduate School of Management skills in doing that. But I think Vanderbilt University, and really Vanderbilt Athletics, is the shining light because of John Ingram. John is a devoted fan. He is an extraordinary philanthropist. Sometimes when I go see him and he's working so hard, he'll say, I'm working hard to give you more money. And that's the kind of big-hearted person John really, really is. He has supported so many projects, endowments, scholarships, the multi-use practice and recreation facility, memorial gym, the football practice facilities, and everything. John is also very much a leader in Nashville in the sports arena, and as you know, was the real person that took Vanderbilt from no way to you have an MLS franchise in Nashville, and we really have John to credit for that. So thank you so much for joining us, John. And our third person on the panel is Adolpho Birch III. Adolpho is also on the board of trusts like John. He is the senior vice president for labor policy and league affairs at the National Football League. I tell Adolpho, he makes more decisions that people complain about than I do. They suspend a player, who deflated the footballs, or anything to do with anything in the league, he is at the center of that story. He's a 1991 graduate of Vanderbilt Law School. I'm privileged to say that Adolpho actually was my student. And we always have to remind people that the university has many wonderful people come here to go to school, to go through this, what the graduate student may lead. So his responsibilities at the NFL are just under the general umbrella of protecting the integrity of the game, working with players, the owners, the league offices, communities to make the game the great game that we love and to really furnish the NFL. So he's dealing with issues like gambling, off-field conduct, substance abuse, steroids, the sort of stuff that is a lot of incoming, but he's always keeping his eyes, we say, on true north. He also has developed a very important program for players. And yesterday he was on panel, so I kind of wanted to work with players more on career after the league and financial literacy and going back to get your degree if you didn't get it. He said, I feel like if I'm the one giving out the tickets, I really need to be working more with these players to show I care so much about them. So Adolpho, it's great to have you here. And thanks for So I'm going to set up a real simple question, and we'll start with you, Carolyn, and just go across. Carolyn, how did you get so interested in sports?
Well, I have an older brother, Stephen. He's 5 years older than me. He was always bringing home trophies. I wanted a trophy. My first sport was swimming, and a lot of people would say, dive in, but she never needed. I mean, big tall, but I was a breaststroker and a backstroker, and then there was softball. I actually tried out for cheerleading, but it was on the same day as basketball. And it made the basketball team, you see those finals in cheerleading. I thought it was a weird system. But basketball became my true love. I started out and played 3-on-3. 6-on-6, half court, and then transition to the 5-man game, and then the introduction of the three-point shot. And being 6'4", I got tired of being beat up, so I'm just running from top of the team to top of the team. But that's basically how I got into sports, and I love the game of basketball.
John?
I was a captain of my intramural basketball team in college. Probably by default. No, I've always played sports since I was a little kid. I love sports. I still compete. I mean, we're very horsey people. So I still do a bunch of jumping competitions and 2 weeks next week. Yeah, I mean it's kind of all the time. So I love competition. I appreciate competition, and also I've been a huge Vanderbilt fan. I didn't go here as an undergraduate. I went to business school, but I always loved the fact that Vanderbilt was a place that represented, a place where you had to go to school and really do the work and yet compete against the toughest league in the country. And I think when we had success here, it's really something to be celebrated. So anyway, I've always been in and around sports, and now I can just yell at players on the soccer pitch.
I grew up playing sports. I played primarily tennis. I played tennis all through high school. I thought I was good at it. And I went to a recruiting meeting, and there were about 70 people in the room. And the coach says, well, we're probably going to take 2 of you. And I looked around and I saw one guy who had routinely beaten me to death in tournaments and things over the years, and his brother was actually number 1 on the team at the time. So I was like, okay, that's 1. So that led me to exercise different options, and I decided that I'd also got a recruiting letter to row crew, and so but I had gotten a letter to be the coxswain, who is the one that sits in the front and kind of is the sort of coach in the boat, but not really considered, the athlete, so to speak. But when I got the letter, I was about 5'5", 5'6". By the time I got to school, I was probably closer to 6 feet.
You were
So I said, I want to row. I'm not going to be a coxswain. I want to row. And I just thought in my mind, I said, well, look, only so many people have done this before they got to college. So I'm going to give it a shot. Let's just see. And I made the team, the freshman team, and it was probably the hardest sport I've ever done in my life.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it was very rewarding because it talks, and we'll talk about this a little bit, I think, but the values and the things that particularly rowing and some other team sports like that teach you, that was critical to me. But after I rowed, then I decided I was going to 1 for 1. Then I tried to be 2 for 2, and I'm going to go out for the lacrosse team. And I hadn't played that in high school, but I felt pretty good because I thought I'm an athlete. I have good hand-eye from tennis. I'm pretty physically fit. I feel like I can do it. And so I made that team, JV. There's a common theme. None of this is at the varsity levels. But I made that team, and that was the most fun sport I'd ever done. I had to this day, I tell anybody it's the most fun sport I've ever played. And then I kind of decided to go 3 for 3 and see what would happen on the basketball team. Did the same on basketball and enjoyed my time doing that as well. So it's not your standard sort of student-athlete experience, but it did, it was reflective of my desire to be involved in sports and my desire to be both a participant and be around it. But how I got into the sports industry was by complete accident, and that was largely based on the idea that when I was working in Houston at a firm. And in my mind, I think, well, I'm working in Houston. I'm doing some things that relate to the team with the stadium situation and all of that. And I know the people down here who were integral in trying to bring the team down. So in my mind, I said, maybe I could do some sort of transition team, work with them. And I reached out to the team, and they did not share that view. But my name got in some kind of hat, and at some point I got a call from the main office in New York, and they said, we have a job. I don't know if you're interested. It's kind of weird. Have you ever done antitrust work? And I said, yes, I did that at my first firm. And they said, well, what about workers' comp? And I said, yes, I did that at the second one. And then they started going on the list, and by the time they got through it, I really thought, I was like, who else would be qualified for this? Because it wasn't like I did all of those things on purpose. Those were the things that came across my desk.
Yeah.
And so, I had to make a decision. Do I want to move to New York? Which I didn't. But I decided to do it because I thought I would enjoy the job, and that was 22 years ago. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
John, you talked a lot about the Vanderbilt way and the way that the kids here are successful on the court, on the field, off the field, the kind of culture we have here. Carolyn, you went to Vanderbilt undergraduate, and Adolpho, you went to Harvard College undergraduate. How did you balance out that I'm going to really be at a serious academic institution and I'm going to play sports? How did you strike the balance? And then what did you get from both being the student and the student athlete at Vanderbilt and Harvard? Adolpho.
Well, for me, I think it was easy because I had no delusions of being a professional athlete. There was no chance of that. Varsity athletes.
I came to it at a much later point.
But I was able to translate it into a very successful intramural law school.
Yes, we still, yes, and it's still talked about. It is
That's
still
my
talked
point.
about.
That's my point.
It is, really.
But no, so so it was never. I always looked at it as one of many things that was a tool, a learning thing, a way for me to be broader and learn, different values and different sort of discipline and other things that I thought would be important no matter what I did. And so it never, to me, the balance was never an issue because I just felt like this is what I need to do. And, I wanted to do both of them, and I wanted to study, and I wanted to go and try to play and be better on, in competition and learn and grow on the, on the court or on the field or whatever it was as well. It really was simple as that for me.
Carolyn, what about you?
Well, I had two parents that were educators. And so when you're being recruited by Tennessee and Vanderbilt and they sit in your living room, your whole family does, and they take a vote, going to Vanderbilt.
You aren't wearing orange. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. But one of the things that, Phil Lee did a great job of recognizing, not everybody can go here. Not everybody can go to a high-quality education university and play sports, and you've got to know what you're looking for. And he knew I was a high achiever. And now, looking back, hindsight, it was the best decision I made, and my husband and I were talking about it as we were in the garage downstairs, actually. And he said, a high education liberal arts school, what does that provide? Well, it separates the difference, like Adolpho talked about, was whether you look through a needle or a hula hoop. And the education that you get at Vanderbilt allows you to look out to the world through a hula hoop because you're prepared for a lot of different things. So when you've got that background and you've got that base, you have the competition because you're competing every day in the classroom, just like you are on the court. And you always have that standard if you want to be the best, so you go after it. Then the other thing is you learn to cope. When I came in here, I was a grade high school student. And when I got my first F, I thought it was the end of the world. But you succeed, you struggle, and sometimes you fail, but you learn how to get back up. And then lastly, you have an accountability. Because as being a student athlete at a high academic institution, you have a GPA that you have to maintain. But you also have a responsibility to your team because how you do reflects on the rest of your team.
Adolpho, what was the conversation? Your mom, professor, your dad, Adolpho, as many of you know, is from Nashville, and his father was the Chief Justice of the Tennessee Supreme Court, Adolpho Birch Jr. What was the conversation like when you started playing? They knew you liked sports, but you're off at Harvard College, and you're like, I'm on the crew team, I'm getting up at 5 o'clock.
5.
Yeah, warm
at 5.
Yeah,
4:30.
Yeah,
4.
And it's not like the Charles is warm and
brutal.
What was
when
that
I say brutal, I meant brutal. It was tough.
What did your parents? How did they talk to you about going to college and playing sports?
The sports part didn't really play a big role in their minds, at least, or the discussion they had. They knew I played sports in high school, and I probably would try to do something. But I think they were much more focused on the bigger picture and being broad and trying to understand the full value of the liberal arts education and kind of looking at those things. When I talked to them about playing, they were interested, but it's not like I ever asked anybody to come up and see a JV, JV crew race. It's not that. So it was never to that point with me. But I mean, I think they liked the idea that I was able to do, 3 sports that I hadn't ever played in high school.
Wow.
And to me, that was more, like I said, my student athlete experience was sort of different. It wasn't mastery of one thing. It was sort of a little bit of achievement on a couple of things. And that to me was important. And that's what I always take away. And that to me helped me because it was risk-taking and it was, trying to prove yourself and learn on the fly and see what's happening while also maintaining on the academic side to make sure you could, the sort of real reason I was there, make sure that didn't slip.
Carolyn, I love was it looking through a needle
I have a needle.
or a hula hoop?
We have to credit Jim O'Brien. my
Yeah,
husband.
okay. So there's a general rule that I have, which is when I give a speech, I say, as Carolyn Peck once said. And then the second time, it's mine. Blatant theft. Let me change this. John, you're from Nashville. You are so involved in Vanderbilt athletics. You and I, you can't go to Kroger, you can't go to dinner without someone telling you, you got to change the quarterback, or why are you running that offense, or, I just can't believe that, you don't have this recruit. And now you're going to own a world, people are going to watch around the world, your soccer team.
Yeah, what's the matter with me, right?
Yeah. So, but I want to ask each of you, John, you've been in that limelight. Carolyn, you've coached. You've been in the limelight with ESPN. Adolpho, you're dealing with incoming all the time. As we talked about yesterday, no one usually calls Adolpho or me saying, I got some really great news that I want you to have, and you take all the credit for it. It's like, I always, my friend John Winklereed says, your job is like the guy in the hurt locker. It's like you don't know what's in there. So talk me through how you deal with that sort of scrutiny and outside pressure. John, why don't we start with you and dealing with, I've got to be nice to this person because they might buy a hot dog, they're going to buy a shirt, and I want them to come to the game, and basically also I'm a nice person. How do you deal with that?
Well, I think one of the things, I will say that, there's no such thing as there should not be any such thing, let me just say, as the owner of a collegiate program, sports program. Yeah. My caveat is that's not the case probably at every place, but it certainly is the place here, and as involved and as interested and whatnot, I'd like to at least believe that I realize I have a role to play, and it's not to, it's defined to being a trustee and a supporter, not the booster that gets to, get in there and cause mischief around. But it was also, it was pretty formative to me because I kind of said, okay, I feel like an owner. In a way. I'm of the Vanderbilt athletic program. I certainly feel a sense of ownership to do what I can to make it all that it can be within my power to do it within the boundaries that I should operate in. And it was one of the things that was, as I was thinking about, is this something I want to do or not do, I kind of said, I actually think I fit it, that I can deal with all that stuff. And so, I was like, okay, check that. There are a few other things to check, but I'll check that one as something that is a reason to do it.
Yeah. When you got the franchise, did you just say also, this is just going to take it up a notch, or
I
put your three-point harness on?
My brother said, I'm like, what are you going to do now? The dog caught the bus.
Well, also, some of John's brothers will say to me, they'll complain about the athletic department and say, you got to tell John. I'm like, you're his brother. You can call him.
No, but seriously, one thing I am proud of the fact that when we were late we went through an expansion process. There were 12 cities, including Nashville, and we were by far the last one to kind of get organized. And I kind of joined the fray right before Christmas of 2016. It was actually, the Tennessean wrote about it December 21st, 2016, and MLS, the commissioner and his team, came to Nashville on December 20th, 2017 to award us the club. It was 364 days. I tell my financial friends, we didn't even have to put it on the balance sheet. It was one day short of a year. But I will say this, and then let the others talk. I think it's really what it's really a tribute to what I've said in other venues about Nashville, and part of Nashville's secret sauce has been Nashville has historically, and when I say historically, the last 25, 30 years, the public sector and the private sector have been able to come together to do really important things. And not just in sports, but in arts and in, you know, the convention center and in lots of ways. And I think that's been really important. And I think it's, you know, it's fragile. I tell people all the time, it doesn't have to be that way. And as we get bigger and more complex, you know, I'm seeing some of it starting to fray, and so I'm concerned about that, to be perfectly honest. But, you know, at the time, our mayor, Megan Barry, made this a priority. And she made it a priority not because she particularly cared about sports one way or another, but she saw that, she knew that soccer's the world sport, okay? It's the world sport. And they're, you know, Nashville is starting to get to be, you know, have a sneaky large foreign-born residents. And a lot of these, you know, whether they're Hispanic or Somali or Kurdish or lots of other groups, they're not really connected to the traditional American sports. But there's a chance for them to be connected to soccer. And she supported soccer because she saw it as a way of bringing the community together. And I agree. And, you know, even though I'm sorry she's, you know, that you know, things went south to her, for her in that particular role, I'm really committed to having soccer be something that helps unify our city, because we all know there's enough divisiveness in our. We need more unifiers. I think soccer.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said, John. Very well said. Adolpho, how do you deal with the, you know, it's like you said yesterday, the first time you heard your name on ESPN, it was like, uh-oh. All right.
And it wasn't with the 53rd pick.
Yeah, exactly. Nor the JV crew team
The Chicago
at Harvard
Bears.
College. How do you deal with all these different constituencies, and they all know whatever you do, a large part of them, you're wrong. And
No, I think, you know, what you learn over time is that you have to have faith in the decision that you make and the process that you use to get there and the policies that you've put into place, the standard that you've set beforehand. You have to have all of that lined up first. Mm-hmm. Then when the you know, sort of consequence occurs, I feel comfortable, no matter what the outcome of that is, because we've done all of that first part. And the second thing I think is you have to understand in my business, you know, you mentioned ownership and who owns what. Well, in my business, our customers own it in a lot of ways. They at least believe they own it. You know, you believe, you know.
Sounds like being a university.
Our team owners,
exactly.
our team owners might view it otherwise, given that there are probably some differences in how they achieved ownership versus the fan. But that, you know, everybody, it's important, and the way I really get through most of the stuff that I deal with is that I know that it matters, even when I think something's not that big a deal in the scheme of things. I've seen 50 of these. I've done this 100 times. I know it matters to everybody else. That's why, you know, when I wake up, I hear it on ESPN. I see it on Sports Talk Radio. I read about it in the Post. And, you know, I know that's going to happen. And in a lot of ways, I'm glad it happens, because that means it matters to people. Yeah. If nobody was calling you, if nobody was talking about it, what are you doing? You're selling widgets and no one cares. Yeah. So I remember one time I had I had a really sort of a tough one that I knew I had to do, and it was going to make a lot of people upset, but it was what we needed to do. And I did it, and I was, you know, taking a lot of heat from a lot of different places. But then I got a call from my aunt. My aunt was, at the time, maybe, well, I shouldn't say her age, but she was, let's just say she's been around for a while. She actually took me to my first game, first Oilers game, and she spent 45 minutes bitching to me about why the Houston Texans were running the 4-3 more than the 3-4. It didn't make sense. It didn't match the personnel. And I mean, 45 minutes straight out. And I, you know, and that just helped me to, I said, okay, that's what it's all about. Because if she didn't care that much about that game, to call me, like I could do something about what scheme the Texans ran, then I knew it mattered. And I was like, we'll be fine. You know, talk is good. It's not quite any publicity is good publicity. I won't go that far, but
been there.
You know, and the other thing I think, just as a small point, I think one of the things you have to know is that when you're getting these situations, you have to feel confident and know that you made the decision based on the information that you had, and that the information you have is almost always more than everybody who's commenting on it.
Yeah.
And once you kind of can deal with that, but also not be compelled to go out and say
Tell
what all
everybody.
you know,
Yeah.
it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah. Carolyn, what about you? You've been in so many different pressure situations where if you do something, everyone loves it, but then you do something else or you say something on the air, and, you know, now with Twitter and everything, how do you deal with the incoming from a standpoint of, all right, I'm going to do the right thing, like Adolpho talked about. I know what I'm doing. I'm going to do the right thing. And, you know, and I think Adolfo's right. When I am on the road and people come up to me and they'll be like class of 63 and they'll be hot and bothered and angry. And it'll literally be something that happened to them in 1965. I mean, I remember one time I was at a reunion and an alum was talking to me about how mad he was at Chancellor Branscombe for moving the fraternities on the campus. And I said, he's gone? I mean, I didn't do that. But that passion is important, but yet it takes its toll on you. How do you deal with that, and how did you develop those skills?
Well, I think it goes back to what Adolpho talked about, of what your core is and what you know, the information you have and believe in. And I think the other thing is there's really only two people's whose opinions matter to me, and that's my mother and my husband.
Yeah.
And so, you know, with social media, let me tell you, you know, Georgia and Tennessee can be playing, and I can compliment a Georgia player, and there's going to be a Tennessee fan just going to tweet and say, I'm pulling for Georgia. Yeah. And so, you know, going in, somebody's not going to be happy with what you said. But as long as you can back it up with facts, you can support your opinion. You know, because when I first started doing ESPN, I would tiptoe around it because I didn't want to make anybody mad. Yeah. My boss called me in and said, we pay you for your opinion. So I was like, that's where the money comes from. So, you know, she said, as long as you can back it up and it is factually based, then you can feel good about what you say.
Yeah, I think Adolpho, do you think the social media has changed things a lot? Do you just ignore it?
No, can't quite do that because it has a lot of positive things. We're able to use social media as well. We can find new fans. We can build new fans. We can give. You know, we have to adapt as an organization. We have to make sure that we get to the people and the customers in the way they want to be gotten to. Yeah. And if you're 22, you don't do things the way that you do if you're 42. Mm-hmm. And so you'd be quite unwise to write off, you know, the platform. But I do think you have to accept and understand the nature of the platform. Yeah. And so you need to get over the idea that what you see on social media represents thoughtful, in-depth reasoned analysis. You have to understand, what is it designed to do? Be the first thing out, 140 characters, on to the next thing. And so you can't get ruffled and flustered by, you know, just these, it's you know,
I know
it's
people
just
who
dribble.
read like comments in the news stories.
Yeah, it is amazing.
And I'm like, one time Lydia was reading And she said, do you see what someone said about you? I was like, well, no, but people say a lot of things about me. And you've got to, let me ask you this question. How important was it that when you made the decision, and I've got my team here, one of my 5 words of leadership is take care of your people. That, Paul Tagliabue or Roger Goodell or John Skipper didn't say, yeah, you're great, and then you do something, it's like, oh, I'm getting all these people. What was that like? Did you get good support? Did that help you through your career when you started getting the incoming? Did you feel supported? Because I think that's really important.
I think it's definitely important. Through John Skipper before he left, and then Pat Lowry's my direct report. And, when you have, especially on the social media, number one, discount anybody that tweets anything with an alias. If you can't put your name on it, then, it really doesn't matter. But, like I made a comment, official, block charge, it's the hardest call in the game. And
Everyone knows it, though.
Exactly.
Everyone knows.
Yeah.
And then, I've got the head of officials, text me during the game and says, no, that call was da-da-da-da. And so after the game, I call Pat, and I'm like, I got this call from Lisa, and she's like, yep, she's got an opinion. You know what? Everybody has one.
Oh, yeah.
She used some other words, but I...
Oh, yeah. I've heard that one. We
Yeah.
never use it.
Yeah.
Never
Yes.
use it. Never.
But she said, did you believe in what you saw? Can you justify what you saw? I said, yes. And she said, delete the text.
Yeah.
So, when you've got support and you can support your decisions, at ESPN we get that kind of support.
Yeah. Adolpho, what about you? I mean,
Well,
you've
I-
had some tough calls.
Yeah, well, one of the things that came to mind when you were asking the question was, I remember when it was sort of maybe late night, like 99, somewhere in there, 2000. I was really young at the league, hadn't been there all that long, but all of the baseball steroid stuff started happening. And by extension, everybody started looking our way, and we had to be in a position to justify what we were doing and show that our program was effective and working and all these sorts of things. And sure enough, we get a kindly letter from a couple of our dear senators who suggested that we ought to come on down for a little
And just turn
little
over
party.
everything.
Yeah. And so we were all, they were, everything was addressed to Commissioner Tagliabue. It's like, we want you to come down and testify at this hearing. And I remember early on, he said, no, wait, you're the one that knows more about this than anybody. He's like, you can do it. I want you to do it. You're gonna be the person to do it. I had never, done it before. I certainly don't know that in the senators' minds that I had enough gravitas to be able to do it at the time. And I'm sure they probably weren't that thrilled about it. And in supporting me, I never heard any of that. Because I am positive that the senators probably called and said, well, we want you. And, he was probably like, yeah, of course you want me, because that's more people, but you're not getting me. You're getting the person that knows the subject matter that you're interested in. And I went down there and I did it.
Wow.
And so, it was both the public support of me to tell me, you can do it, you're fine, you'll be okay. But it was also the private support of keeping people off of me that would have made me, doubt maybe whether I could do it. And he dealt with all of that. And I talk about that with my staff a lot in terms of understand that there are a lot of things that are happening that, I may be taking one for you on an issue, just relax. It's okay. I'm not asking you to give me credit for it. I'm just telling you what's going on. But at some point, as you progress, you're going to start seeing those. And that's how I got with the point about first time I saw my name instead of the league. Then I was like, okay, so now, things
I think
have
you
changed.
really then get the best people working for you, I think. I mean, I know that's true of my team where it's like, oh, okay, got my back, we're all in this together. John, you made, I think, a really insightful point about the changing nature of Nashville and, kind of a much more diverse city. And when you and I were talking about this, of course, I wasn't making the investment and you were, but I said, John, I think soccer is a perfect fit for this dynamic global city of Nashville. So you were kind of ahead on a kind of a sport that drives diversity. How do you think as leaders and working with players and owners, how do you think about diversity on camera, on the coaching seat, in the C-suite, in the ownership group? That must come up, Adolpho, with you. Okay, how do we go from player, certainly comes up in the NBA, all right, or I'll hear kids say, I don't want to play for a team, I want to own a team.
Yeah.
How do you think about that pipeline development and diversifying your sports from top to really the fan base as well? Adolpho?
Well, I was telling people earlier about if you look at things like the Rooney Rule, right? The Rooney Rule was started. It was Dan Rooney. He's passed, but he was a brilliant leader of the Steelers forever. It's been in his family. But at one point, we were in a league meeting, and we were talking about sort of head coaches and the lack of diversity among the ranks. And it basically came down to him saying, "I'm tired of talking about it. We need to do something. We need to be intentional. We need to act." And that's part, that dovetails with what my dad always used to say. It's like, look, belief without action is opinion. And opinion ain't worth anything. So, he ultimately agreed that it was a process issue. You have to at least talk to one diverse candidate for any head coaching position that you were looking to fill. Sounds simple. But that did a lot of things. It created a standard. It created an objective. It created a statement of what we wanted to be as a league. And it also provided opportunities, because even the person that was interviewing, if they didn't get the job, it was helpful. It gave them experience. It allowed them to get more comfortable so that maybe the next time they'd do better. It forced all the owners and coaches and GMs and others who were doing the hiring to really assess what it is that was important about that coaching job. Not who you knew, oh, he's great on television. What is it? What do you really want in a coach? What are the attributes? Is it punctuality? Is it organization? Is it ability to deal with the media? Is it the scheme? Is it the ability to hire, who can recruit and hire the best assistant coaches? Is it, really get granular, because now you're forced to ask real questions and talk to real people rather than, oh, we're going to go out and get dinner with the guy I already know. I've lined him up because of, he's friends with this agent and I think he'd be great. So it had a lot of impact in sort of forcing a change in how we looked at things. To his credit, now you can go to any company and you will hear, I hear it all the time, they'll say, oh, this company, we're going to adopt the Rooney Rule and try, so it's beyond sports. It's just it's a broader business ideal as a method to try to be intentional about diversity. And, you add that with pipelining and making sure that you're addressing the development of future talent. You want people that are, you need assistant coaches, because those assistant coaches become position coaches. You need position coaches because those position coaches become coordinators. And so you have to be very intentional about those sorts of things to provide opportunity. Once you get to opportunity, we are comfortable at the NFL that it is a production business and it is the ultimate meritocracy. So you'll get it if you're supposed to get it, you'll get it. And that's, I think culturally, and it goes back to my point about you have to lay all those steps in place. And once you do all that, you can feel comfortable whatever the outcome. This year we didn't do so well, but we know that the system is in place and the system is doing what it's supposed to do, so we'll be okay this year. We'll see what happens next year.
And I think the best practice is to ignore the norm
Yeah.
and go hire the best person for the job. You mentioned the word opportunity. And in recruiting, especially in trying to get student athletes to come to Vanderbilt, you have a choice between opportunity and security. I'm taking opportunity all day long. And when you look at ESPN, Doris Burke was hired. She's now on the prime package for the NBA.
Yeah.
You have Beth Mowens, who is calling NFL games. You have Jessica Mendoza that's calling Major League Baseball. I know all three of those women very well. And they don't have the job because they're women. They have the job because they're pretty dang good at what they do. And so what ESPN did was not go, okay, I need a man who played the sport, that sounds the part, looks the part, but somebody who knows the game.
Yeah.
And so I think when you're willing to break the norm and go out and hire the best person for the job, because you know exactly what is required of that job, you'll get the right person.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very well
That's
said.
good.
John, go ahead,
Sorry,
Adolpho.
no, but I was going to
Jump
add,
in.
like, we're talking about women in particular, in the NFL, the example that came while you were talking about that was this woman, Heather Brooks,
Yes.
Carrots. She was my law clerk at the NFL. She's a Vandy grad,
Yeah.
and she is now the president of the XFL team in LA.
Yeah.
And so, that, to me, that's one thing that's really important when we're talking about opportunities. The NFL, we've tried to be very intentional in our league about showing that women have a place, not just in marketing, not just in sponsorship or some of those things, but in football. And so we've done a lot to try to push, the idea of being in personnel or being in football operations or ultimately running a franchise. And she's a prime example of that, coming, straight out of, I don't know which house she was in, but
Yeah.
And
straight from there.
House hired Dickie Grove.
Well, I was going to say,
Assistant coach.
yeah,
Yeah.
you probably saw that our new men's basketball coach hired a woman as
On
an
his staff.
assistant
Yeah.
on his staff. And it's interesting, people say to me, God, a woman coaching men. I said, do you see how many men coach women's teams?
There you go.
And so why isn't
not?
it symmetrical? You just have talented people, and
Yeah.
why did you have that reaction? And so, John, how do you think about your brand, the diversity, the global brand you have, international players? How do you think about the diversity of the franchise and the team and connecting to, at a university, we just thrive on that. We love it. I mean, we're looking for talent like you are. How do you think of it, John?
Well, we've got the Rooney Rule at Ingram. And we don't call it that,
Yeah.
but we don't. One thing I would say is oftentimes when you're recruiting, unless you insist upon it, you won't necessarily get it. But if you insist upon it, then either you're going to find out your recruiter's no good, or you start getting diverse candidates, and then Carolyn, as you said, or Adolpho, both. Then you pick the best person,
right.
and it be whoever it is. We have we've done this thing at Ingram for the last 4 or 5 years. We call it Women at Ingram, and it really stems from the fact that are we getting out of our female population that we should get? And a lot of it has to do with the fact that, in many cases, a man and a woman will approach the same situation differently. And particularly if you're a guy in a position picking, unless you understand that, and here's a situation, I mean, that would be a typical situation. You have a chance for a promotion, and you've got, let's say, 2 equal candidates, one man, one woman. They're both 70% qualified. the typical reaction, and you always got to be careful, I mean, but in general, what might happen is the guy goes, I got this, okay? 70%, I can do this. And oftentimes, the woman might go, yeah, but there's this 30% that I'm still working on. And if you're a male, an unenlightened male, I've been called that by my wife a few times. But I'm in training. She says I'm doing better. 23 years, and I'm still getting better. But in this case, you know, you almost have to understand the difference of approach, because many times, I mean, the woman's a better candidate, and to understand how the approach differences, you pick her as opposed to going, well, she wants to keep working on what she's doing. I'm going to go with this guy because he thinks he's ready. You know,
And we know people aren't ever really ready to do the job. When you get in there, it's like, okay.
So that's the kind of mindset that we have, and building our, you know, our management of the soccer teams not any different from a approach standpoint. Yeah, you need different skills, but you need different skills to run a barge company than a book content company too. So you know, obviously I haven't gotten as far into it as either, you know, Carolyn's experience or Adolpho, but I'm not worried about it. And I'm you know, looking forward to it, and you know, and the league has got some work to do. But you know, it's interesting. You know, we were just there, and last week we had league meetings, and looking, the league was going to expand to 28 teams. Now it's 30 teams, and they kind of got a pretty good idea about team 28 and 29. And I will tell you, one of those teams, it's not by far the only factor, but a material factor is that the ownership group is primarily women.
Wow.
Good for them.
So and that matters in the decision.
Yeah, you know, John and I did the athletic department, the search for the athletic director, and we were just like, okay, well, just don't go to the Rolodex and stretch yourself, and I basically said, who are all of the senior people who are women and people of color in college athletics? I mean, this is not an impossible task for you to do this. And I think I spoke to every candidate personally. And then when we came upon Malcolm, I mean, we said, and I think defining what is the job, as opposed to, well, so-and-so coached under so-and-so and Belichick called me. And I don't mean to pick on him, but that's not like, can you do the job? And you know, John and I spent a lot of time saying, what are we looking for? And, you know, we came upon Malcolm Turner, and I think some people say, well, you know, he's not done college athletics. And I was like, well, you know, he's actually worked a lot in college athletics, and the G League is a lot, and he went to Harvard Law School and Harvard Business School. I think he can figure it out. And what we
with
need,
a long background in consulting.
yeah, with a
that's what
long
you
background
do.
in consulting and
Yeah.
college sports. But we were looking for something, and we defined that, and I think that's really, really important. And I think the provost, all of us would say, what are you really hiring for? You're not hiring from, oh, this person worked with so-and-so. That's a good, all right, they have a good reference or something, but what are you really trying to get people to do? So, you know, I think American sports really is such an important part of the American cultural scene, the American entertainment scene. It's probably one of our biggest export brands to have players overseas or leagues overseas. What does professional sports look like in 15 years? And then what does college sports look like in 15 years? Carolyn, I'll start with you.
Well, I think for both, revenue-wise, eventually the primary sports are going to, I feel like, tap out. You can only squeeze so much blood from a turnip. I think that there are new revenue areas that need to be looked into, and whoever figures it out will make a whole lot of money. And I think part of that can be in women's sports, because I think that that is an interesting, it's an entertaining sport, whether you're talking about soccer, whether you're talking about basketball, the WNBA, or even talking about softball. I don't know about you all, but I'm pretty much locked into the college softball right now. And so my hope would be in 15 years that the media world would give more exposure to women's sports, because people are interested in things that they are exposed to and things that they are told are important. Yeah. And instead of what a lot of women's sports get is the leftover inventory. So it's treated as a, oh, by the way. Yeah. Where if it were treated as an important area, and I think that goes college as well. I think that in college sports, when you look at across the board, you have teams now. Remember, South Carolina, when I played, was non-existent. Yeah. And now they lead the nation in attendance because Columbia, South Carolina made it important. Now, nobody used to ever talk about Oregon. Phil Knight invested out there, and now Oregon was in the Final Four. So there are different teams. It's not the Connecticut's, it's not the Tennessees anymore. It's the Baylors now, yeah, which were teams that weren't on the landscape. And when schools figure out that you make it important, it will become important to everybody else. That's a revenue stream, because it's really all about the money. And people talk about, not many people go to the games because they don't know about it. And I think that that is an area to where it's an untapped resource financially.
I think it's a great point overall financially and more broadly. John, what do you think?
Well, I mean, college athletics is kind of unique in the world because there are lots of institutions of learning all over the world, but only in America, is it kind of do we have all these games and sports that are played. And to me, I love the way Vanderbilt does it because we do it with true student athletes. But it's a place to unify, and it's a little bit. I've heard people talk. I haven't had this experience of maybe they're having a tough time with their parents or their kids or something like that, but they could still go to games together, mm-hmm, right? I mean, so there's this thing that it's important, and sports are important in our culture. Yes. And I would say I think sports is an important part of being at Vanderbilt. Yeah. And I think it's important to do it the way we do it, and do it with kids that go to the same classes, and it makes it harder, but it also I think makes it worthy. But it's also and you want to do it reasonably well. I mean, you don't have to win every national championship, but people want to be proud of their university, and I know at Vanderbilt, and I brought this today in the paper, and I'm both a digital guy and I'm both an old school guy too. I read both, but this is the front page of today's paper. It's got a Vanderbilt football player on it who came from a very disadvantaged background, who's going to get drafted, and it tells his story, and you know what I mean. I want to pick on. I was an English major. I want to pick on the English department, but the English department isn't on the front page of the newspaper.
Hopefully not,
bad
because if it's on the front page, if it's on the front page of the paper,
yeah,
but they're writing the
right.
newspaper.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think it's important, and it's important when things are good. I mean, it gets a lot of attention when things are good. It gets a lot of attention when things are bad. But it's a real opportunity for connection, and I mean that's the college game. The pro sport and kind of what's happening in media is, I think you're going to see even further fragmentation. I watch a lot of games, on over the top, ESPN Plus. I mean, stuff that you'd never have a chance to see. And Carolyn, that may be a way, to get the exposure that you were talking about. For $4.99 a month, I mean, you can just have an absolute smorgasbord of almost any kind of sport that you want. And I think not only over the top, but the younger people, millennials and below, I think a lot of it's going to be consumed differently. I mean, they're not going to want to watch the whole game. They're going to want to watch highlights or certain snippets. And so I think there's going to be a robust, dynamic, changing environment that I couldn't possibly tell you exactly what, but I think it's going to be more fragmented and more exposure to more sports. Cool. Because, let's say, live sports is still, I think, the gold standard. I mean, that to see something live, and it's fine to see the replay. Sometimes you don't have to have your heart in your mouth because you won, or if you want to watch, but there's nothing quite like live sports, and I think that's going to always be valuable.
Yeah, no, I think I would start where you ended, which is the one thing that I think is a certitude is that sports viewed live, whether in stadium or on television, will always be the greatest reality show that we have. It will always be at the top. There will not ever be anything that replicates that, because you cannot replicate the live sports experience. The ways in which we consume it will certainly change. But, I tend to lean toward the ideas about community and unifying factors and multi-generational, viewership and things to feel like we're always going to be a pivotal part of the social fabric. When you understand that I went to football games with my aunt and uncle, and that's how I started liking sport, football, and that's how I started to watch it. And when you understand that fathers often look at the idea about fantasy football, and they're talking about how they play fantasy football with their daughters, and that's the way that they connected with their daughters. They had something to talk about, and it became their time, and it was something that was important to them. Or a grandfather taking his grandkid to see his first baseball game and teaching them how to do the stat card or the box scores and things like that. And the idea that for most sports, it is not something that can be enjoyed by yourself. You don't watch sports by yourself. Some you do maybe, and some sports maybe with more games, longer seasons. But let's take the NFL. No one watches the NFL by themselves. You either go somewhere to watch it with other people, or the family's like, all right, the game's coming on at 9, sit around and let's watch it. And the idea about that level of community and the socialness of it, and going the next morning to work, and everybody, oh, did you see that game? Wow, gosh. Or, oh, boy, did you see what that Adolpho Birch did, what he did to my guy? That is irreplaceable. And it is a distinctly different thing than even things like Game of Thrones or, other dramas. It's just different. And that is, they can get close, but you will never replicate that. So I think in time, you're going to sit here, we're going to maybe talk about different sports. It may look a little different. The rules may be different. The uniforms may be different. The way in which you watch it may be different. The stadiums may be smaller. They may be bigger. The seasons may be longer, shorter, but we're going to be watching sports. I'm comfortable.
The one thing that'll stay constant in sports is the player-coach relationship. That is the one thing that will stay constant. And those that don't evolve, because kids nowadays are independent thinkers. And when you don't evolve, then a change is made. Those that do, because you look back at the days of Bobby Knight, that don't work so much now. I can say that. I coached at Purdue.
Yeah.
But
Gene Katie.
Gene Katie.
Yeah.
Gene Katie.
Yeah. But now, you just see kids are independent thinkers now. They speak their mind. You know, they've got instant whatever, don't have to wait till later, it's right here, and coaches, so that relationship's going to be, that's the one thing that's going to be constant.
Yeah, well, you know, we tend to be more comfortable because we're a college campus. And so if somebody's upset about something or protests something, we're kind of like, well, of course that's what should happen on a college campus. I think Adolpho has to deal with it in a little different way.
Right.
And I prefer my job to his. So our time is up. Let's give a great round of applause. Adolpho, thank you so much. John, fabulous. Carolyn, thank you so much. It's great.